So, when you think about what threatens Australia's amazing wildlife, what comes to mind? Probably things like habitat loss, maybe even predators like cats or foxes. But today, we're going to pull back the curtain on a hidden danger, one that's way smaller and honestly way more insidious: the tick. We're going to explore how this tiny arachnid is silently spreading disease and posing a huge, often fatal risk to some of Australia's most unique animals. Right off the bat, this quote from the research just hits you. Rapid depopulation, local extinction. I mean, those are some heavy words, right? It's a really stark reminder that a threat doesn't have to be big and obvious to be absolutely devastating. Something as small as one infected tick can have catastrophic consequences for an entire ecosystem. Okay, so to really wrap our heads around this, we got to take a step back and start with the big picture. Let's talk about parasites, organisms that live off a host. It's a concept we're all pretty familiar with, but we're about to look at it through a whole new and frankly more alarming lens. More specifically, we're zeroing in on ectoparasites. And that ecto prefix, it just means outside. So these are the parasites that live on the surface of their host. Their whole life can play out on the skin and fur of an animal, which makes them a constant direct threat. So here you can see the two main groups we're talking about. On one side, you've got ticks and mites. They're arachnids, like spiders. On the other, lice and fleas, which are insects. But here's the kicker. Almost all the research in Australia has been focused on ticks, mostly because of how much they affect farm animals. The threat they pose to native wildlife, it's been a massive, and I mean huge and dangerous blind spot. All right, so let's do exactly that. Let's narrow our focus and dive right into the specific threat that's unfolding in Australia's incredible ecosystems. And this right here, this is the core of the issue. We have mountains of data, literal mountains, on how ticks affect cattle and sheep. But when you look for info on Australia's icons, animals like koalas, kangaroos, or even the lesser-known but super important quolls and bandicoots, you hear crickets. It's this gap in our knowledge that makes the whole situation so tricky and so dangerous. So why are we so laser-focused on ticks? Well, this number says it all. Get this, more than 90%. Over 90% of all vector-borne diseases are transmitted by ticks. They are, and it's not even close, the undisputed world champions of spreading pathogens. They're just the most effective disease delivery systems out there. So now, let's meet the culprits. Let's put these pathogens in a lineup and see exactly what we're dealing with. What are these microscopic threats that make ticks so dangerous? First on our list is Babesia. It's a protozoa that causes something called tick fever. And just look at that list of hosts. It is alarmingly diverse. We're not just talking about cattle and dogs. It's also been found in native marsupials like quolls and bandicoots and even echidnas. A pathogen that can jump this easily between livestock and native species is incredibly concerning. Next up, we've got a couple of nasty bacteria. First, there's Ehrlichia, which can cause a really serious blood disease. It's carried by the common brown dog tick. And here's the really sneaky part. Dogs can be infected without showing any symptoms at all. They become a silent reservoir for the disease that could easily spill over to native animals like the dingo. Then you've got Coxiella, which causes Q fever. Its tick carrier isn't a picky eater either. It'll feed on everything from bandicoots to birds. And this is where you really see how diverse and complex these threats are. The Rickettsia bacteria show just how specific these relationships can be. You have Queensland tick typhus, spread by ticks that feed on mammals. And then you have Flinders Island spotted fever, which is spread by a tick that only feeds on reptiles, like blue-tongued lizards and snakes. It just shows how complicated this whole web really is. And just when you think it can't get any more complex, you've got to add long-distance travel to the mix. Think about it. Migratory birds can carry infected ticks across continents, completely ignoring natural barriers. They can introduce a pathogen from thousands of kilometers away into a vulnerable, isolated ecosystem, basically creating a brand new disease hotspot overnight. So we've seen the microscopic villains. Now let's turn to the victims and see the real-world impact this is having on Australia's incredible animals. And our first case study is just chilling. It's a perfect example of how a tick can be deadly without even transmitting a disease. See, the Australian paralysis tick injects a powerful neurotoxin when it feeds, and that can lead to paralysis and often death. This is where things get really weird. Native marsupials seem to have figured this tick out. They've evolved a resistance to its toxins, so they're pretty much okay. But the spectacled flying fox? No such luck. For them, this one tick is causing a massive population drop. It's a powerful lesson that the same threat can affect different species in completely different ways. But the danger isn't just about diseases or toxins. Sometimes it's a numbers game. The sheer volume of ticks on one animal can be devastating. Just picture a koala, an animal that's already under a lot of stress, suffering from anemia because it's being literally drained of blood by countless ticks. Or a bandicoot that's so stressed out from constantly fighting them off that its immune system is shot, making it an easy target for anything else that comes along. Okay, so let's zoom back out. What does all this mean for the bigger picture of conservation? This is where this hidden threat becomes a full-blown crisis. We all think of captive breeding programs as these amazing safety nets for endangered species, right? A safe place where they can rebuild their numbers. But what if that very safety net has a hidden flaw? One that only shows up at the worst possible moment. Let's just walk through this, because it's a real paradox. First, you raise an animal in a super clean, tick-free bubble. But the stress of being in captivity can actually weaken its immune system. So now you have what's called an immunologically naive animal. It's never been exposed to these threats, so it has zero natural defenses. Then you release it into the wild, and its very first meeting with a tick can be its last. And we have to be clear, the stakes couldn't be higher. This isn't just about losing a few individual animals. When an entire group of re-released animals is wiped out, you lose all of their unique genes. That genetic diversity is what a species needs to adapt and survive in the long run. It's like throwing away the blueprint for their future, undoing years of conservation work in one go. All right, so where does all this leave us? What's the final word from all this research on this complex, often invisible threat? You know, after going through all of this, the single biggest takeaway is just how much we don't know. This research is basically a giant flare being shot up, signaling this huge gap in our understanding. We know the threat is real, absolutely, but the scale of it? How big is the fire? How fast is it spreading? We're still mostly in the dark. And that leaves us with one last kind of sobering thought to chew on. Ticks are just one piece of the puzzle, right? As our world keeps changing, as climate and habitat shift, you just have to wonder, what other silent threats are out there, just waiting in the shadows for us to find them?